Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody.
Hillary Clinton wants to abolish it, believe me. She wants to abolish our Second Amendment.
I think they didn't deny it. I don't think anybody denied it.
Other presidents did not call. They'd write letters, and some presidents didn't do anything.
Many people have come out and said I'm right.
You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Hello and welcome to Fallacious Trump, the podcast where we use the insane ramblings of a man who can't afford a tux that fits to explain logical fallacies. I'm your host, Jim.
And I'm your other host, Mark. A logical fallacy is an error in reasoning that results in bad or invalid arguments. The logical fallacy we're looking at this week is the single cause fallacy, also known as causal reductionism, complex cause, the reductive fallacy, and oversimplification.
So yeah, it's got a lot of names, this one. And the one we're going with is single cause.
Both the single cause and the complex cause.
Yeah, well, complex cause is a nod to what's actually going on in reality.
Right.
And the single cause is what people do by mistake. But it doesn't have to be one single cause. Basically, this is when people attribute most of the cause of something or all of the cause of something to a single issue or a limited number of issues, when actually it's a lot more complicated than that. And in reality, in most things in life, it's a lot more complicated than that. It's rare that something can really be pinned down to a single cause.
But it's very convenient to have it do it.
It is very convenient, and it's very natural for us to look for that, to look for, what was the cause of this thing happening and try and...
Spotted myself do it many times in researching this. Yeah. And just going, oh my God, we do it all the time. Yeah.
We really do. Yeah. I've done it probably several times on this podcast. I can think of when I've talked about reasons why people doing things being based on the fact that as humans we're really good at looking at patterns, looking for patterns, and actually sometimes our brain does that too much, and that's why we do this particular thing. Yeah, that's one of the reasons. So my first example from Trump is a tweet that he sent basically on December the 1st of 2017. Veteran ABC journalist Brian Ross reported that Mike Flynn would be testifying that Trump had asked him to contact the Russians during the campaign. That didn't turn out to be true. In fact, Trump waited until after the election to ask Flynn to make contact with the Russians. But,
okay.
And Trump tweeted a couple of days later, he said, "People who lost money when the stock market went down 350 points based on the false and dishonest reporting of Brian Ross of ABC News, he has been suspended, should consider hiring a lawyer and suing ABC for the damages this bad reporting has caused, many millions of dollars." So Trump is attributing the drop in the stock market to Brian Ross on ABC saying that Flynn would testify something negative about Trump.
Yeah,
those two things don't seem inextricably linked, but there was a drop in mid-morning on December 1st in the Dow Jones Industrial Average of somewhere in the region of 350 points. However, within half an hour, it had actually recovered half of those lost points, and by the end of the day, it was only 40 points down. Despite the fact that ABC News didn't actually issue a correction to the story until the evening after the market had finished trading.
Oh, right. Okay.
So, yes, the report was incorrect. It wasn't fake news. It was speculation at the time that turned out to be incorrect. Yeah. It may possibly have been a factor in the stock market fluctuation, but the stock market fluctuates all the time for loads and loads of different reasons. There are so many things that decide the direction and size of fluctuations. And to suggest that this was all due to Brian Ross, to the extent that you would be able to sue him for the money you lost.
Yeah, for your damages.
Yeah.
Yeah, because many of the things that cause the stock market to go up and down are nothing to do with politics at all. They just be to do with the price of commodities.
Absolutely. Or the perceived price that the commodities might be the next day or in 3 hours, or just someone looking at fluctuations and thinking, oh, that's a time to sell, or all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
It changes so much. Basically, over the past 50 years, one day in every 3 has seen a bigger drop from open to close than that day. It is completely normal for a day of trading.
Yeah. consistently over 50 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
It is not
brilliant.
it wasn't a big drop. There have been plenty of bigger ones that Trump has said were due to other things, and plenty of rises that Trump has claimed complete responsibility for.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah. So what? Yeah. So if it's wrong of Trump to point out that this drop was down to that report, then it's also wrong for him to say it goes up because of him. Well, yeah, we know that. So it's kind of reducing it to the simplest cause.
Yeah.
So so this guy wrote the report, and the stock market plummeted because the implied thing is, because I'm so important to the economy of the US, if you diss me in any way and question my truthfulness and standing in the political world, then that will immediately impact the market. That's the implied thing, isn't it? So he's saying you need to steer clear. So it's a self-serving thing when he kind of does it and says, I am directly responsible for the increase in aircraft safety. So he does that simple cause thing because it serves his end, and this one serves his end in two ways. One, to dismiss what Brian Ross has said, and to promote him as an important a linchpin, a foundation, if you will, for the economy of the US. So you can't say anything bad about me because that will have a direct impact on the stock market. So he's kind of defending his own position and allowing, it gives him, in dissing Brian Ross, it also, he's establishing his right to be able to do that because he is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you said, if every time it goes up and he says, how can they talk about impeaching me when the stock market is up? Very basically saying, because of me.
It's exactly.
It's a bit more complicated.
If you take me out of the picture, yes, quite. Yeah, not least because the stock market has been, not only has been fluctuating over the last 50 years, it's been existing quite happily over the last 47 years without Trump. So, despite Trump and his attempts to manipulate it during the 80s and 90s.
So our second Trump example this week is from after the Parkland shooting, when the Republicans were looking for possible reasons for school shootings and mass shootings that didn't involve guns, because that's too simple a cause. And Trump said this.
We have to do something about maybe what they're seeing and how they're seeing it, and also video games. I'm hearing more and more people say the level of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts. And then you go the further step, and that's the movies. You see these movies, they're so violent, and yet a kid is able to see the movie if sex isn't involved, but killing is involved. And maybe they have to put a rating system for that.
Yeah, if only they had a rating system for movies.
I know. Yeah, that could
like the
employ
NBA,
the likes of you. Yeah,
a bit like that.
Or like the American equivalent of the thing that used to employ you in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, exactly.
Here,
or like the ESRB for video games, for example.
Exactly. Yeah, that kind of that warns people against not only sexual content, but
also
killing, violence, and even swearing. Yeah, and But it's weird, isn't it? It's the same argument that gets trotted out each and every time. It happened in the 80s here in the UK, and it just happens with every. Instead of going, do you know what? Guns don't kill people. Games do.
Wayne LaPierre, head of the NRA, literally used that argument. He not recently, he has literally said guns don't kill people. People watching violent video games and violent films do.
Okay, so why is it not true then that people go out and bury hundreds of people under lots of candy?
Yeah.
Or there are people driving around in tiny carts all the time. You hear a lot of that, mass cart pile-ups in school playgrounds all over the place. Yeah.
Since as Mark alluded to there, I used to actually do this, rate video games and films, and consequently I have studied the media effects, the issue, the psychology behind aggression and violence in media quite extensively. There is certainly no proven link. There is very little suggestion that there is a real link between violence in media and violence in real life. Certainly in individual cases, people who are already troubled, have mental health issues or have a propensity towards violence can choose violent media to consume. It often, works in that direction and can be influenced in the exact type of thing they do. But any research that points towards people being made more aggressive or anything like that from watching violence tends to be quite unconvincing studies. They tend to be quite motivated and poorly researched.
So there's no direct causal link that's been established.
Yeah, well, apart from anything else, I mean, if you think about how video games were back in the early 90s and how undetailed they were, and I mean, the height of violence was probably things like Doom, which obviously was partly blamed for Columbine and things like that. But it's laughable to look at it now compared to some of the stuff that we've got today. And since the early 90s, violence has been dropping year on year. Violent crime in the US, according to FBI figures and stuff, has gone down and down and down. And while our the accessibility of violence in video, convincing realistic violence in video games has gone up and up and up. And the spread of people actually playing video games has increased dramatically. So there's just clearly no link in that direction. And Trump, to be completely fair, wasn't claiming that it's the only thing. He wasn't claiming that it's all due to videos and video games, but he was trying to push it as a significant cause. And that's just not realistic, and it distracts from the fact that actually there are many, many causes, among them social economic issues and guns.
Easy access to firearms. Yeah. Maybe, kind of high grade military all available over the counter with very few background checks. Yeah. Whereas, actually you can't buy video games under 18. Some of them.
Well, in the UK.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's legally restricted. The ESRB system in the US is a voluntary system, so it's advice. Right. And some stores do restrict access to kids, but some just don't really care.
And now is the time, I think, for Mark's British politics corner.
It's good, actually, that this is about a simple cause for stuff, because the past several weeks in politics, where are we? Yeah, we're kind of like 2 weeks on from the European elections, that we, continuing to be members of the European Union, had to take part in, so that there are British members of the European Parliament that are put forward and voted for. In the last round of European elections, there were at least 4 factions where we're going to hear from 4 representatives of 4 parties. So the reason I chose this is because the elections happened, there were results, and it's all very complicated as to why the results are the way that they are. And in the show notes, we'll put in a link to the Guardian newspaper online did a great thing about, here are the results split by varying groupings and graphs and so on. It really lays it out quite nicely. But what happens is, and I suspect this happens with every election, that each party views the results and views the explanation of the results in a very simple way. They put it down to a single cause as to why the results went the way they did. So this clip consists of Nigel Farage, who was the leader of the UK Independence Party, which he left and retired from politics, and then he came back into politics and formed the Brexit Party. Guess what their single policy is. And then it's followed by Theresa May, who's the Conservative leader. Well, she's just stepped down as the Conservative leader today. Emily Thornberry from the Labour Party and Caroline Lucas from the Green Party. And they all have varying views on the results of the election.
This has happened. This party has had this meteoric rise in 6 weeks because we didn't leave on March the 29th. If we don't leave on the 31st of October, those parties will lose even more votes to us.
We saw some very good MEPs losing their seats. We saw some great candidates not gaining their seats. But the Labour Party also saw significant losses. And I think what it shows is the importance of actually delivering on Brexit.
The most important issue was what was our view on leaving the European Union, and we were not clear about it. We were not clear on the one single thing that people wanted to hear.
The clear conclusion from tonight is that those parties that made it their business to be saying that our future is better off inside the EU had a really fantastic night.
So you have to excuse the rather loungy music in the background of the last two clips because it's off a Guardian website explainer video. What's interesting in editing those together is that they use words like important and clear in different contexts. So Farage is saying it's because we didn't leave on the 29th of March. Theresa May is saying the reason people didn't vote for the Conservatives is that they didn't deliver Brexit. In fact, I think both she and Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, the opposition, said, the clear message we're getting from the fact that nobody voted for us in the European elections is that we need to deliver Brexit.
Yeah, it's not the fact that they're the ones still supporting Brexit. And kind of vaguely.
No, exactly, yeah. Yeah, quite. So which kind of leads me to think, well, actually, the single cause that everybody alights on is the one that serves them the best. Yeah. Even Emily Thornberry, who's bit of a critic of Corbyn's stance on she's a pro-Remain, so she really wants the Labour Party to just take up this single cause, quite literally, which is to remain. The people that succeeded in the European elections, the Liberal Party, the Liberal Democrats was one of them, who were disgraced when they went into coalition with David Cameron's Conservative Party. We talked about that before. But their policy was bollocks to Brexit, which, they published that on their flyers. And so it's clear what their stance was. And the Green Party, Caroline Lucas, the last voice we heard, their stance was a pro-Remain stance. And Emily Thornberry is saying we need to have been clearer. So it serves each of their individual purposes. But yeah, so in the very fact that they are supplying these many different single causes, it illustrates that it isn't a single issue, which is I find quite hilarious. So the second clip, I've kind of strayed over into your territory, Jim, because this has got a bit of Hillary Clinton. So she's on BBC News. This is about she's hawking her book around why she lost the election. And let's hear what her single cause is.
I'm very familiar with what the Leave side said because they transported a lot of that on behalf of Trump. You had Farage campaigning for Trump and the like. The big lie is a very potent tool.
It's all about why she lost the election, and it would appear that Brexit, the phenomenon of Brexit, which spilled across to the USA, is the reason that she lost. And she's basically saying that I lied to the British electorate. And what she's doing here is not just defending her own position, but acting as the high priestess of the globalist movement.
So, of course, she isn't actually blaming Farage at all. What she's doing is setting up the argument for the big lie. She's talking about the big lie is a potent tool, this idea that you can have fake news and you can just keep telling the big lie and eventually it will have some traction. That's her single cause.
Yeah.
What Farage is doing is making the two thoughts connected, and this is on Fox and Friends, so she has a bit of, he has a bit of help from them. So he's reducing it to a single cause because it suits him to do that. And what he's doing is saying, well, this is because she's selling the book. She's also saying that I lied to the electorate, which he did. But then what he does is the magician's sleight of hand by making you look at Hillary's motivation for saying that rather than having him answer the question as to why he did lie, because he did. And, you can rely on Fox and Friends not to ask that question. If he was on Newsnight, they might have said, well, hang on a minute. Yeah. You did lie to the electorate. It occurs to me that the single cause is a kind of a straw man. So you're simplifying the other person's argument or the situation in itself. So in such a way that you can talk about it in a single sentence, in a single call to action, and then act on that. So you either refute it or you boil it down to that particular point and then say that's the thing we've got to sort out. So in Theresa May's thing, we've got to deliver Brexit. Emily Thornberry says we need the Labour Party to be clearer. Caroline Lucas is saying everybody wants to remain. Nigel Farage is saying everybody wants to leave. So they are, in a way, straw manning an argument that is not being made. They are preempting somebody making that argument and just gathering it all in and squashing it into a little simple thing that they can then go, you see, there's the problem. And it's all about partisanness. So as we can see from 4 different people, they talked about the same thing in 4 different ways because it suited them to do so.
Yeah.
And terrifyingly, I've spotted myself doing that almost every day. It's where you kind of, you're in a situation and you go, okay, so what you're saying is you simplify it, or what the situation calls for is this. So if we just do that, then that will get what we want. And or if
someone asks, well, why did this happen? And you're like, well, it was because of that particular thing. It's so easy.
All we need to do is just fix that.
For people kind of looking to improve their critical thinking skills generally and try and kind of stop themselves from doing these things, this is a good one to keep an eye out for, because you definitely do it. And it's one of those that when you think about it, you do kind of notice yourself doing it, and it is good if you're trying to be more intellectually honest and trying to do better critical thinking. It is a good thing to think when you notice yourself doing it. Well, actually, is this situation a bit more complicated than that? Yeah. And do I need to look for other causes or then there are some things which are just going to be a single cause, and that's okay. Yeah. And you can examine that and see whether that is the case, or whether the cause that you are looking at is in fact just overwhelmingly the main thing. That's fine. Mm-hmm. Or actually, if there's more that you should consider.
It's a fallacy in the wild. 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 It's a fallacy.
You're getting your Tom Jones on.
Tom Jones there with... It's because it's Tom Jones' birthday today. He's 78 today.
There was a reason for it then. It wasn't just you being retro.
Yeah. Okay. No. Well, yeah, there is that as well. Yeah, I was inspired by the loungeness of the Guardian explainer video. But yeah, also it is his birthday today. Yeah, happy birthday, Sir Tom. Yeah.
So in the Fallacy in the Wild, we like to look at the Fallacy of the Week from a non-political perspective. And our first example is from Blackadder Goes Forth. This is from the excellent final episode, which remains one of the best half hours of TV in history.
Yeah.
And
Quite
it's
simply.
from when Baldrick is trying to find out why the war started.
The war started because of the vile Hun and his villainous empire building.
George, the British Empire at present covers a quarter of the globe, while the German Empire consists of a small sausage factory in Tanganyika. I hardly think that we can be entirely absolved from blame on the imperialistic front.
No, sir, absolutely not. Mad as a bicycle.
I heard that it started when a bloke called Archie Duke shot an ostrich because he was hungry.
I think you mean it started when the Archduke of Austro-Hungary got shot.
No, there was definitely an ostrich involved.
Well, possibly. But the real reason for the whole thing was that it was just too much effort not to have a war.
By gum, this is interesting. I always loved history. The Battle of Hastings, Henry VIII and his 6 knives, all that.
You see, Baldrick, in order to prevent war in Europe, 2 superblocks developed. Us, the French and the Russians on one side, and the Germans and Austro-Hungary on the other. The idea was to have 2 vast opposing armies, each acting as the other's deterrent. That way, there could never be a war.
But this is a sort of a war, isn't it, sir?
Yes, that's right. You see, there was a tiny flaw in the plan.
What was that, sir?
It was bollocks.
Bollocks, the word bollocks twice in one episode. That's fantastic.
So, yeah.
Yay.
So George's single cause for the war starting is the vile Huns empire building, which...
From their sausage factory
which Blackadder neatly counters by saying, actually, there's more to it.
Yeah.
And Baldrick brings up what is often given as the cause of World War One, the assassination of Archduke
Hungry
Ferdinand.
ostriches.
And there is no doubt that triggered the events that began the war. That is what led Hungary to declare war on Serbia and Germany to kind of join in with them, and then ultimately all of the countries going against each other. But there's a lot more to it than that, and there was a decade of kind of a naval arms race between the UK and Germany. There was the big alliances between the countries that Blackadder was talking about there that did create this conflict in waiting in a way. Not to mention the growth of the Industrial Revolution and the consequent reduction in available resources, because people were grabbing resources for themselves to feed industry, and the need then in some cases to try and grab other people's resources and other countries' resources, and empires to encroach on one another. It's really, really complicated. Basically is what I'm saying. And it does often get simplified down to the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand.
It belongs to that set of things. Well, here we are reducing it right now. It belongs to that set of things which includes, we find it very easy to make things into patterns. We find it comforting for there to be a complete narrative arc. And we like there to be a single cause, because then that allows us to kind of deal with it in such a way that it's the war to end all wars, so we can't let this happen again. Whereas what the European project after the Second World War was to try and acknowledge the complexity of everything and try to avoid the simplification of history, such that we just say, oh well, as long as an archduke doesn't get shot, we won't go to war.
Absolutely. That simplification is comforting, in the feeling that if there's one cause and you can remove that cause, then that means that you're safe. But if you really want to avoid history repeating itself, you do need to understand the causes. You do need to understand the complexity of the situation and try and figure out what can be done to counter the things that actually led up to something happening in so many different ways. So it's dangerous in some ways.
And also that and it's dangerous to simplify it, to say that. There's a Michael Rosen kind of poem doing the rounds. He's a poet in the UK,
yeah.
He was for a while, yeah, with Jewish heritage, and he wrote a poem about the fact that fascists don't look like fascists. They don't come in fancy dress, and that's the scary thing. So there is that simplification that, well, you know, Trump and Erdogan and Assad and whoever can't be seen as being fascists because they don't wear a shiny peaked cap and insignia on their arms. Well, that's a simplification. You know, that's, you know, not all fascists are Nazis. All Nazis are fascists, but not all fascists are Nazis. Some of the anti-Trump rhetoric that Corbyn was coming out with this week when Trump was visiting the UK was about we should stand up to leaders that are using racist tropes and xenophobic and nationalistic terminologies. You know, that's stuff we've seen before. They may not come dressed as Nazis, but that's stuff we've seen before. We ought not to simplify stuff and look for a single cause, because if we do, then they'll come in via another door. You know, they'll not come in fancy dress. They'll just come in a suit with a very long red tie.
Yeah. Yeah. So the second example in the Fallacy in the Wild this week is from Friends, and it is from the letter that Rachel wrote to Ross when he was hoping to get back together with her after they were on a break. And when he finally got around to reading the long letter, the 18 pages front and back, he was a bit surprised to find what her main conclusion was.
She wants me to take responsibility for everything that went wrong in our relationship. I mean, she goes on for 5 pages about how I was unfaithful to her. We were on a break!
Oh, my God. If you say that one more time, I'm going to break up with you.
Fine, but this breakup was not all my fault. And she says here, if you accept full responsibility, I can begin to trust you again. Does that seem like something you can do? Does it?
As it turns out, it does not. But
no,
yeah, basically Rachel is asking Ross to simplify it. She is asking him to say it was all his fault. And it was a bit more complicated than that.
Yeah.
There's still arguments among Friends fans over not only were they actually on a break, they definitely were, but also whose fault it was, whose fault the breakup was and the breakdown in the relationship. Ross was definitely partly to blame. What had happened at this point was Mark, a handsome stranger, had met Rachel at a diner and given her a job, her dream job at Bloomingdale's.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So she was very happy with that and possibly flirted a bit with Mark, and Mark was definitely interested in getting with Rachel, and Ross was extremely jealous of the situation. He was very insecure. He massively overplayed his hand in trying to show Rachel how much he cared for her and how and kind of was staking out his territory and claiming her for himself and trying to show Mark that she was taken. And yeah, he was totally overbearing and horrible, but Mark had some skin in the game as well. He had definitely had some blame because he was being probably over familiar with someone who was in a relationship and was round at her apartment when she told him that she didn't need him to go there and that kind of stuff. And Rachel was not very sensitive to Ross's feelings about this. And Rachel was the one who ultimately broke off the relationship and then got very upset at Ross for thinking that they had broken up and for sleeping with someone. So it wasn't as simple as it was all Ross's fault, even though, in my opinion, it was mostly Ross's fault. So...
But there's a learned exchange going on online. I can still see it. How long ago is it? Like 20 years since it was on. People are still talking about it. Yeah. But I mean, that's how much we were invested in it at the time. Oh my God, it was life. It was life-defining stuff. It was kind of the model by which we lived our lives.
So the counter to this fallacy, basically, is really simply to point out that it is more complicated than than just the single cause that is being suggested, or the simple cause.
Yeah.
And in fact, what this made me think of was Ben Goldacre's book Bad Science, where he does talk a lot about the kinds of arguments that alternative medicine proponents use to claim that their thing is responsible for good things happening and stuff like that. And a trope that he uses again and again in the book is to say, I think you'll find it's a bit more complicated than that, to the point where they actually had T-shirts made up of that. And a later book that he wrote, which was a collection of his articles, was called I think you'll find it's a bit more complicated than that.
You find it's a bit more complicated than that. Brilliant.
That really is it is rarely as simple as that there is one cause for something happening, and so it's worth pointing that out and trying to remember it yourself. So before we move on to fake news, just a quick update on the Trump Deadpool competition, which is officially started now, and there are 11 of us involved. So I'm not going to go on about this because most of you aren't involved. But if you want to follow along, there'll be the leaderboard will be on the Facebook page, and also at fallacioustrump.com/Deadpool. We've all made our picks. We've chosen the people that we think are going to go. The most popular pick is William Barr to go. 6 of the 11 people in the competition have chosen William Barr. And a number of people haven't been chosen by anyone. Most prominent of those are Mike Pence and Betsy DeVos, who can go without having any impact on the competition at all, and I hope that Betsy DeVos does. I almost picked her, actually. I had her on my list, but it was really wish fulfillment rather than actually thinking she will go, because she does
maybe that's what
seems
people
to
are
make
doing,
any difference.
I think that's probably people being more realistic than anything else. But they're just going, there are key members that you think they're just not going to go because Trump's not going to get rid of them.
So we shall see. If any Trump appointees or administration members do go, feel free to email us or tweet us, because I might not catch every single one of them. So do let us know.
So we're gonna play fake news, folks. I love the game. It's a great game. I understand the game as well as anybody.
Yes, it's time for fake news, the game where I read out 3 Trump quotes, 2 of which are real and 1 I made up, and Mark has to figure out which one is fake news.
Yeah, and I'm currently million out of 25.
Something like that. 9 out of 25. Yeah,
9 out of 25.
That's I think it's 36%, which is pretty good, actually.
Yeah,
it's better than chance.
Yeah, well, I think the reason is the reason I haven't done so well is I'm hastily coming up with a single cause. Is that basically I can't get any of them right.
I think that's true. That's the main reason that your score is how.
It is no more complicated than that.
Yeah.
It's actually, that's it.
So,
okay, bring it on.
The theme this week, and these are actually a bit longer than usual this week, because Trump does like to ramble like a fucking maniac. And the theme is about ISIS.
Yeah. Okay.
Statement number 1. What I see is we have thousands of migrants from Syria and Iran who could be ISIS. I don't know. Maybe they don't know either. And I see that they're not good people. I mean, they're bad mostly bad. And they're coming over to America and trying to get across the border into America. But we can't have ISIS coming to our shores again and killing more of our people. So you ask 2 things. Number 1, how do we stop them in their tracks before they reach our borders? And number 2, we've got to do something about it. So,
okay. When did they last come to American shores then?
Statement number 2.
Yeah.
When I took over, Syria was loaded with ISIS. And again, when you say, and I've always said, who are we killing ISIS for? You know, the worst enemy of Russia, Iran, Syria, if you look at it, is ISIS. So we're killing ISIS for people that aren't necessarily always in agreement with us. Let's put it that way. We've gone into Syria, and in 2 years, we've, I guess, reduced it to about 99% of the territorial caliphate. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to have somebody around, and who knows what happened and who it was, because nobody's sure. But I will say this, we've taken it. Syria was a mess.
Territorial caliphate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
reduced it to about 99% from 100.
I think he meant by 99%, but...
Yeah. But, you know... Yeah.
Statement number 3. I went to Iraq and I met the generals, and one general said, "Sir, we can do it in 1 week." I said, "Wait a minute." They said 2 years. They said, "That's because we're hitting them at a much different level." And we did it, and now we have 100% of the ISIS. It's been completely obliterated. And that doesn't mean you don't have cells and these crazy people. I've got to say it because you saw it. You can never say we won, because if you say we won and then somebody blows up a store, some crazy maniac, but we just beat the hell out of them, and we're trying to now beat them at the internet because there's nobody better at the internet than them.
Nobody. Not Bill Gates, not Zuckerberg, nobody. It's all ISIS. Yeah, get your software from ISIS. Okay, so we've got 100% of them, but that doesn't mean we've won, because you can never say we've won. Okay, because he learnt from mission accomplished. Okay, so, thousands it could be. I don't know. Maybe they don't know either. They're not good people. They're bad, mostly bad. Okay. When I took over, Syria was loaded with ISIS. It kind of sounds like some sort of fungal infection. And when you say, who are we killing ISIS? And when you say, and I've always said, who are we killing ISIS? Yeah, he's constantly saying that. Worst enemy, Syria, if you look at it, we're killing ISIS for people that aren't necessarily always in agreement with us. Okay, so I'm a bit suspicious of territorial caliphate. And I quite like the fact he's killing ISIS for people that aren't necessarily always in agreement. I quite like that. So then we're going to have someone around. Crazy people, wait a minute, 2 years. I think that one sounds quite convincing. So, okay, I think number one is the one that you made up.
Okay. So which of the other two are you more confident about?
Number three.
Okay.
The generals.
So number three is real.
I went to Iraq and I met the generals, and one general said, "Sir, we can do it in 1 week." I said, "Wait a minute." They said, 2 years. They said, "That's because we're hitting them at a much different level." And we did it, and we now have 100% of the ISIS. It's been completely obliterated. And that doesn't mean you don't have cells and these crazy people. I got to say it, because you saw it. You can never say we won, because if you say we won and then somebody blows up a store, some crazy maniac, but we just beat the hell out of them. And we're trying to now beat them at the internet, because there's nobody better at the internet than them.
He is some crazy maniac, isn't he? He just kind of wanders off and just what? He can't explain anything in. So we could do it in a week. I said, wait a minute. I said 2 years. What, hitting them at a much different level? What on earth does that mean?
No sense at all in that.
No, no, they're completely obliterated. But we haven't won because someone will pop up. Well, then you haven't completely. It's a lot more complicated than you're making out. I think you'll find it's a bit more complicated than
that. Now that was in April of this year.
No,
when
really?
He claimed that they had 100% wiped out ISIS. It wasn't the first time he'd claimed that they'd 100% wiped out ISIS. The first time was actually in December of 2017.
Well, that's right. So it sounded like an older one. Yeah.
He's claimed it a number of times since. However, the US-led coalition against ISIS, formerly known as the Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve, say that actually there's still around 10,000 ISIS fighters in Iraq and thousands in Syria. So they've got the territory. They wiped out essentially the territory. So ISIS no longer controls any specific areas, but it's not just cells of crazy maniacs blowing up a store. It is still a considerable fighting force that is there.
Yeah, and it always will be, and that's the thing, because it will be termed, because they're very good at the internet, they will term it in terms of an American oppressor.
Yeah. So
so
you also think that number two is real?
Yeah.
And number two is real.
When I took over, Syria was loaded with ISIS. And again, when you say to it, and I've always said, who are we killing ISIS for? You know, the worst enemy of Russia, Iran, Syria, you look at it, is ISIS. So we're killing ISIS for people that aren't necessarily always in agreement with us. Let's put it that way. We've gone into Syria, and in 2 years, we've, I guess, reduced it to about 99% of the territorial caliphate. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to have somebody around, and who knows what happened and who it was. Nobody's sure. But I will say this. We've taken it. Syria was a mess.
And who knows what happened and who it was, because nobody is sure. What the hell? That doesn't mean you're not going to have somebody around and who knows what happened and who it was. If he was drunk, you could get away with that. If you're drunk, you kind of go, that's understandable because you're drunk.
Yeah.
But no, he's just doing his usual thing, standing in front of a helicopter.
Yeah, it's always when Marine One is just firing up its engines.
Because you think, then he can say, well, the most cogent and lucid and important bits got lost in the swirl of the rotors going. But it's just, oh, God, it's rubbish, isn't it? It's not even, far be it from us to say that George W. was, a kind of a clear thinking and, with oratorical skills. But this is just nonsense, isn't it?
Which means that statement number one was fake news, as you said. And actually, I didn't make that one up. That was sent in by a listener.
Hey! Right.
You wait 25 episodes and ask every time, and then you stop asking, and
they
and
come
one
flooding
comes along.
in at the rate of one a week. That's brilliant.
So I have to thank Richard Thunder Hopkins, our friend of the show, patron, Facebook group member, Twitter follower. He's great. He's a good supporter, and he sent in our first listener submitted Trump quote. If you'd like
it is a very good one.
To join his ranks, then you can send a quote in on Twitter to me, or you can join our Facebook group and private message me on Facebook and send me a quote. I have to say I did edit that a little bit because it was a bit long at first, and so maybe it was my editing that meant that you caught it as the fake. But you did catch it, so you're now on 10 out of 25, which is 40%.
Yay!
So you're creeping up towards a respectable score.
Oh, right. Yeah. But I could never get 100%.
Well, no, because you've lost so many.
Yes.
So it's time for the part of the show where we want to talk about all the crazy things that are happening in Washington, but we can't talk about everything, so we pick one particular subject. And this week, at least, this part of the show is called Democratic Presidential Candidates Are Not a Logical Fallacy, because there's so many of them. And we figured it was time we talked about a few of them, but in an interesting way. So what we've done, there's a website which you may have heard of called isidewith.com. And what it lets you do is put in it asks questions, and you can have multiple choice. You can say what you think about all of the main policies that presidential candidates tend to talk about. And then it gives you a list of which of the current candidates fit most with your points of view.
And also the questions that you get asked is quite a nice set of questions, because there are some of them just go yes, no, and then it says there's this kind of a thing which is the equivalent of it's a bit more complicated than that. And you click on that and it opens up a whole different yes, but with these caveats, or no, but with these caveats.
So we each did this quiz. It takes about 20 minutes, I'd say.
Yeah, something like
that. So we've got our picks. Neither of us have heard who the other one picked. And going in, I said I figured that Mark was a little bit more left than me. I'm definitely left. I mean, I think that's probably clear from the 26 episodes so far. But I'm probably more centre left, certainly in the UK. I think that there is a difference, as one of our guests, Ron Placone, said. The kind of what we consider left in the UK is quite different from the leftmost party in the US. The Democrat Party is probably more right than our left party. I would class myself as kind of centre left in the UK, which would probably be quite left wing in the US. And Mark is a raging commie pinko. So
basically, yeah, that's right. Yeah. I have to declare that every time I go to the US. Yeah. So did you on
your
the
first pick?
The top left of the I side with, it tells you how your percentage.
Oh yeah, which party you? Yeah.
So I'm 90% socialist.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm 79% Democrat apparently. So.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Interesting.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting because my top candidate is Elizabeth Warren. 96%. Oh,
okay.
There you go.
That's interesting. Mine's 92% Elizabeth Warren.
Okay, so. I'm 96%, followed by followed by Julian Castro, a twin brother of Joaquim. Yeah. And then Bernie Sanders, and then Kamala, and then Kirsten Gillibrand, and then Tulsi Gabbard, then Cory Booker, then Beto O'Rourke, and then Amy Klobuchar.
Okay.
Klobuchar, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
well, my top two are both 92%. It's Elizabeth Warren and Kirsten Gillibrand.
Oh, okay,
And then on 91%, like right just there, and in second place, joint second place, I've got Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Julian Castro, and Bernie Sanders. So
wow.
That's my
all
top
of those
six.
You've got kind of one amalgamated super Democrat there. Made of those.
I think
Bernie Sanders' hair and
going all the way down. I mean, I've got the next. There's 2 on 90%. There's 3 on 89%. So that's like 12 all between 89 and 92% agreement.
Yeah, mine are between 90 and 96.
Yeah. So I think what that shows me is that there's actually not that much difference between these candidates in terms of policy. They are very kind of generic Democrat policies. Most of the what's going on, what these people are saying already that they believe in. There's not a lot of people kind of standing out from the pack in terms of, trying to say something or do something different. There's a few that have kind of come up with some policies that are interesting, but they're kind of playing it safe, I think, quite a lot.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting below each thing, so you get the little the picture and then the percentage, and then you get their name in bold type, and then below that, I guess they're kind of top 6-7 qualities.
Yeah.
And none of mine, until you get down to Beto O'Rourke, I've got charisma. So I've got Beto O'Rourke. He's way down. He's like the bottom last but one. And his first one is charisma, and then ability to unify. And you think, well, that's probably important in the Democrats, given that everybody's doing this in a siloed kind of way and they're all fairly similar. You need somebody that can pull it all together and go, let's just actually stop fighting each other and do it.
Now, if you scroll all the way down, you can see what percentage you match with Donald Trump.
Oh, really? Well, right at the bottom. I am 22% Trump.
Wow. I'm only 18% Trump, so I feel that's...
Wow. I wonder what... Yeah. Well, I've got... What's interesting there is got patriotism, confidence, toughness, protectionism, nationalism. They're not good things, are they? And then anthropocentrism.
Yeah.
So it's like...
That's weird.
That's like...
That's saying that people do stuff, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's interested in doing
climate change. Yeah, but I don't know.
Anthropocentric, anthropomorphism. You can understand. You know.
I mean, he's vaguely anthropomorphic. Kind of human shaped ish.
Yes, kind of human attributes attached to it, and it's a very old photo. His hair isn't yellow in that. Wow, that is a little bit scary. That I'm Whoa.
22%
Trump.
So of your top few candidates on there, what do you think of them as candidates based on what you know of them at the moment?
Well, Bernie Sanders, it's interesting because I would have thought that, my own view of myself is that I'm a progressive socialist, which is what Bernie Sanders is described as being, and yet that doesn't feature at all in Elizabeth Warren's description, who is a left-wing environmentalist. Oh, there's progressive. Keynesian. Oh, my God, she's Keynesian. What the hell? And Julian Castro. And
you've gone into the more detailed section. Yeah,
they're Keynesian, that's Reaganomics and the Thatcherism and all that kind of.
Well, not really.
Yeah, yeah. It's about after whom Milton Keynes was after whom Milton Keynes, the city in
John
the
Maynard
UK
Keynes,
was named. Yeah, so it was about the mechanisation of the working man. It was about how do you make a better pin and all of that stuff, from where the phrase pin money comes, apparently, because it used to be a manual task to make pins, and then it got automated under Keynesian new radical proposals to mechanise stuff. So consequently, people, socialist, collectivist and progressive ideals went out the window, because they went, well, we could make more pins with fewer people for more money, and we haven't got to pay anybody.
Keynesian was really about kind of tying the economy to the product, the output of the workers, and increasing government spending, which is partly what Warren and people like that want to do. But it's spending on not things like defence, but on people, on social programs.
Yes, exactly.
So she is for lowering taxes on the working people, the average American,
right?
But raising taxes on giant corporations and on the wealthiest, as is Kamala Harris. They've both put forward proposals for much higher taxes on the absolute wealthiest, the people who are literally billionaires. So I'm okay with that. I'm
good.
fine.
Yeah, good with that. Yep. In those terms, and I can deal with. See, what I was doing there was making a single simple cause of our Keynesianism. Yeah. Yes.
So I really like Elizabeth Warren. I think she is really smart. She has got the most plans for things at the moment. Instead of just saying, this is something I'd like to do, she's actually saying, here's how I would go about doing that for more and more issues, which she's kind of leaving the other candidates in the dust as far as that's concerned. Really, she seems to have a plan for everything. Kirsten Gillibrand, who's my second, I really am not sure about. I think the policies that she's spoken about are good, but she kind of stood out early on for trying to be the face, not the face of Me Too, but pushing Me Too as a big thing, and because that's also been taken up by lots of other candidates and are saying, yes, this is really something we need to look at and consider. She's got lost in the mix a bit, and in fact, she's polling incredibly poorly for someone of her stature. And I mean, she's a senator. She should be able to get significant support, you would think. And
not least from being recognised as being an active.
But I mean, the DNC criteria for debates, I think for the first one, you have to poll above 1%. In three major polls, and you have to, or you have to have got 65,000 individual donors, and at the moment she has just about polled over 1% in a few polls. She hasn't got 65,000 individual donors, so she's just about getting into the debate criteria as at the moment. but that's for the very first debates.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my word!
23 people. They're going to probably have to increase the criteria, and they've already announced that for the July, for debates after July, they're going to double that requirement.
Wow!
And she won't make it. She just won't be on the stage. So
wow! So she's not. She's kind of her standout moment. The Me Too wave was she hasn't got anything
to do something else.
After
she
that.
needs to she needs to stand out for something else if she wants to. To kind of have a chance, I think.
So I've got Julian Castro as my second. All I know about him is that he's Joaquim's brother.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of all I know.
Yeah,
So I'm surprised that he popped up.
He hasn't really achieved any particular level of fame. He was in Obama's cabinet. And he was...
That's right. Yeah.
He was a mayor of somewhere in Texas. But yeah, he's not really made a big splash, but I mean, he seems okay from what I've seen. He's not nothing particularly against him.
So do you think, is he just riding high on the fact that he is on the anti-Trump wall thing?
I mean, I think they're all so strongly anti-Trump.
And
that is kind of one of the defining characteristics of everyone in the way that you can't define anyone if they're all the same. They are all just saying everything that Trump's immigration policies, all of that. They're just against it. Some of them are saying what they would do instead, but a lot of them are just saying not Trump.
We don't like that.
I think it's really difficult to discriminate between them in places. I think there's people like Bernie Sanders who is quite different. He is very old. He would be 80 if he got in.
Wow.
He's bright and interesting and has some good ideas, but got to kind of worry, I think, about someone doing that job.
He's a bit like Tony Benn. He's kind of an old school socialist. Tony Benn was, he's the kind of the intellectual leader that the Labour Party never had. And he was always the progressive thinker and just, became an elder and respected repository of all of the entire history of the Labour movement in the UK, pretty much. And Bernie Sanders kind of belongs in there, that kind of thing. He's going to be the leader, the president, the best president that the US never had. Is what's going to happen to Bernie Sanders. Another thing
I don't like about Bernie, to be honest, is that he's not a Democrat. He's an independent, running for the Democrat candidate, and what that meant in 2016. Whereas I think if any other Democrat had been in the last two with Hillary, when they pulled out, they would have endorsed Hillary.
Yeah,
I believe that if it had been, if it had been someone else, they would have said, okay, I'm dropping out, but I am, very much in favour of Hillary beating Trump. You should all vote for Hillary. All the people who wanted to vote for me should vote for Hillary. He did not do that. He didn't endorse her, and a lot of his followers stayed home. Some of them voted for Trump, and that basically handed Trump the presidency. And that
exactly. And I think that was
a big mistake.
It was also a mistake on. You can tell he was a bit miffed because he didn't get picked and Hillary did.
Sure, and you can understand that, but that's politics. That happens.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, I think there's a risk of that happening again if it's Bernie and Joe Biden, for example, which I don't think it should be. But if it was, I think there's a strong possibility that Bernie again would end up dropping out and not endorsing Joe. And at this point, I don't like Joe Biden particularly. He's 77% on me.
I've got 78.
77.
Yeah.
I disagree with a lot of stuff about him, but if it's Biden versus Trump, I'm Biden all the way.
Well, quite. I mean, and that's the kind of thing that actually they've got
blue.
to. Yeah, they've got to kind of just they've just got to buy into that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the thing about the European elections over here, was that there were 2 or 3 organisations that were saying, okay, we're not sure what Labour is going to say. We know what the Tories are going to say. We want to avoid getting leavers into the European Parliament, because if we don't end up leaving Europe, who would you want to represent us in Europe? People that want to participate within the European Union, or people that want to leave? So there's this whole thing about tactical voting. It said, whatever you feel about the Liberal Party in your district, you need to vote for the Liberal Party, because that will guarantee us a Remain vote, an anti-Brexit vote. So I think, this time round, the Democrats have just got to, even if it involves Bernie, if you're listening, even if it involves holding your nose and handing over the baton to Biden, God help us, do it. To a certain extent, it isn't about who is representing the Democrats. It's just that we need to get the Democrats in.
Yeah.
So you need to just kind of scoop up your voters and pass them on to whoever's likely to get past the post. And, hopefully it'll be Elizabeth Warren. But,
Or
but if,
my third pick, Kamala Harris, who I think is brilliant. I love Kamala Harris. She made such an impact in the hearings for Brett Kavanaugh. She's she's a career prosecutor. She asked some really intelligent questions in ways that were designed to get useful answers. She did it again with Bill Barr, and I just think I'm really looking forward to watching her in the debates. I think her and Elizabeth Warren are going to kick ass in the debates. Both of them are really, really clever lawyers, and they are going to, they're going to have some fun and stand out, I think. And that's the thing about this point. Gillibrand, for example, who is polling so poorly at the moment, if she can make an impact in a debate, it can really turn around. At this stage, it is so early, and there's so many of them. That some of them will drop out as time goes on, and those followers will migrate to someone else, and there's still an opportunity for some of the people who are kind of lower down the list to stand out. So the last one I want to just briefly talk about is Cory Booker, who's kind of fourth on my list of these.
I've got him in 90%.
Pete Buttigieg is getting a lot of press, and everyone's really impressed that he speaks multiple languages and is a Rhodes Scholar and all that kind of stuff. Cory Booker is also a Rhodes Scholar. He studied at Stanford and Yale and Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar. He speaks multiple languages. He's really, really smart. And I just think it would be so nice to have an intelligent person. And we've got it's an embarrassment of riches of really intelligent people in this field. There's a lot of people who would be great. So
it would be interesting actually to do a similar thing with this I side with thing. It's really nice the way it summarizes the particular candidate's standpoints, and you kind of think if the the number one for Bernie Sanders is honesty. So Boris Johnson, that wouldn't appear.
No, it is. I mean, we're not sponsored by I Side With, unfortunately. But if anyone from I Side With is listening, we are open. But I think it's really and really interesting because you can, once you've done it, you can click on the individual candidates and see where they match up with you and which bits you disagree with them on, and it gives you information that you can then use to kind of make your decisions and see who you like.
And finally, some things we really don't have time to talk about.
Last week, Robert Mueller made a public statement for the first time since the release of his report. He spoke for 8 minutes and basically just repeated what the report concluded. To be honest, at first, I thought it was a confusing waste of time. But then I've read the Mueller report. Conservatives who still haven't lost their shit at what they saw was brand new information. For example, John Podhoretz wrote in the New York Post, if Mueller didn't intend to signal to Congress that his report could serve as the basis for an impeachment, his statement was wildly incompetent. He did intend that. He intended it all over the place.
In a somewhat obvious attempt to frame any move away from non-fossil fuels as an infringement of liberty, Stephen Weinberg, Assistant Secretary for Fossil Energy, described Texas-produced natural gas as molecules of US freedom. With the US in another year of record-setting natural gas production, I am pleased that the Department of Energy is doing what it can to promote an efficient regulatory system that allows for molecules of US freedom to be exported to the world. Mark Menzies, the Undersecretary of Energy, slightly less poetically and certainly less sci-fi-y, added, increasing export capacity from the Freeport LNG project is critical to spreading freedom gas throughout the world. Even here in the UK, where we don't call gastric disturbances gas, that's still quite icky. I guess it's what comes from chomping on too many of those freedom fries, Donald.
Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn has fired his legal team at the point in his case where there is only the sentencing left to go. The move comes after the release of a voicemail left for his lawyer by Trump attorney John Dowd, in which Dowd basically asked Flynn to give him a heads up if he was going to implicate Trump in any crimes. Nobody seems to know who Flynn has chosen to represent him or why he's made the change, but irresponsible speculation is that he is going to withdraw his guilty plea because he's noticed all the other people getting away with crimes in plain sight and figures he'll just give obstructing justice a go. It's all the rage.
Yeah, I've got a hat with it. Meanwhile, in the UK, the wrinkled, rubbery, orange, angry, tweeting blimp drove straight past the inflatable Trump baby balloon and 75,000 protesters in Trafalgar Square. I know he did because they're captured in the same picture. So unless he was looking at the National Portrait Gallery at the time, yeah, right, his own protestations that, it's fake news, there were tremendous crowds of well-wishers. They were mainly the police lining the route, one deep, look to be what they are, self-serving guff, which incidentally is what they used to pump up the balloon, by the way. Later in the visit, he tried to lecture Leo Varadkar, the Irish PM, on how it'll all be great after you have the wall and the border, only to be told to his face by Leo, but we don't want a wall or a border. Trump, of course, carried on saying what he says about walls and borders and not listening to anyone or the truth or facts or the evidence in front of his eyes. Our hearts really go out to you, America. We're exhausted as a nation after 3 days of this circus freak show, and you have it all the time.
While in Europe, Trump attended events celebrating the 75th anniversary of D-Day and held up the opening ceremony by 14 minutes so that he could be interviewed by Laura Ingraham on Fox, against the backdrop of a French military cemetery where thousands of American soldiers are buried. Of course, he used his time to honour the fallen heroes and thank them for their sacrifice. Well, for literally 45 seconds anyway. But because he's a massive arsehole, he spent the rest of the time talking about how much the Queen liked him, how great tariffs are, calling Chuck Schumer a jerk, Nancy Pelosi a disaster, and Robert Mueller a fool. That's decorated military veteran Robert Mueller on fucking D-Day.
Meanwhile, in the UK, the protest group led by donkeys, a reference, of course, to how we all are, projected a giant red baseball cap onto the dome of Madame Tussauds in London, a cap with USS John McCain on it. Consequently, and quite delightfully, Amazon have completely sold out of caps online. I guess they're just trying to keep them out of sight. Well, that's what the Navy should have done with the actual USS John McCain in Japan. Bung it on eBay.
Just a few hours ago, as of this recording, Trump tweeted, "For all the money we're spending, NASA should not be talking about going to the moon. We did that 50 years ago. They should be focused on the much bigger things we're doing, including Mars, of which the moon is a part, defence and science." Which is either massively ignorant or incompetently worded, both of which are super fun traits for a president. Maybe he was just thinking of that time when Kennedy said, "We choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is Mars."
In other news, progress on my home improvement fencing work includes painting it to improve its aesthetic appearance. Kind of important when you want it to blend in with the rest of the garden. Not so important when you're trying to keep border crossers from crossing the border fence, hey? Mine cost about $40 for a drum of brown creosote, and I did it myself in an afternoon with a 99-cent brush. Whilst Trump favours black, and Customs and Border Protection indicated that the Department of Defence spent $150,000 and used 100 men for a month. Congressman Joaquin Castro, chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, channeled his best Star Trek's Dr. McCoy and said, "These are soldiers, they're not painters." If only Trump could read, because there's a Huckleberry Finn tale on this very subject.
So that's all the bad arguments and faulty reasoning we have time for this episode. You can find the show notes at fallacioustrump.com, and if you hear Trump say something stupid and want to ask if it's a fallacy, our contact details are on the contact page.
If you think we've used a fallacy ourselves, let us know. And if you've had a good time, please give us a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, as it will become, or Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can support the show on our Patreon page at patreon.com/ftrump, just like our newest patrons, Lauren Phillips, Democracy is Zucked, and Cat Commander. Thanks, guys.
You can also connect with us and other listeners in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/FallaciousTrump. Also, the Merseyside Skeptics Society, run by friend of the show Michael Marshall, are having a 10th anniversary event in Liverpool on July 6th. Mark and I will be there. So if you're in the area and fancy a day of skeptical fun, go to mssx.co.uk to get tickets and come and say hi. Mark might even buy you a beer. Probably not. Beer not guaranteed.
No. Why me? Why am I buying? Yeah. Look out for us. We'll probably be wearing Fallacious Trump t-shirts.
Could be.
All music is by The Outburst and was used with permission. So until next time on Fallacious Trump, we'll leave the last word to the Donald.
That's right. Go home to mommy. Bye. Bye.